The signal came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Dr. Isabella Martinez had been analyzing deep space biological signatures for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything like this. The readout pulsed with impossible patterns, organic matter intertwined with artificial structures in ways that defied known science. "Director Hammond, you need to see this," she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The aging research director shuffled over, coffee cup in hand, clearly expecting another false positive. His expression changed the moment he saw the screen. "My God," he whispered. "Is that moving?" The massive object, nearly 3 kilometers in length, was indeed changing shape as it approached the outer edges of the solar system. Its surface rippled like muscle tissue, but gleamed with metallic intensity under the distant sunlight. Most disturbing were the smaller objects detaching from its hull, each one a perfect fusion of biology and machinery. Within hours, every major space agency and military installation was on high alert. Captain James Wilson stood on the bridge of the UES Hyperion, Earth's most advanced defensive vessel, watching the approaching biomechanical fleet with growing unease. 20 years in space combat hadn't prepared him for this. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our database," his tactical officer, Lieutenant Reeves, reported. "They're evolving as we watch." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Get me a direct line to command. And someone find Dr. Martinez, I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The next 48 hours became a blur of activity. Isabella found herself transported from her quiet research facility to a high-security military bunker, where she worked alongside the world's leading scientists to understand the nature of their visitors. The entities, soon dubbed harvesters, for their apparent ability to absorb and repurpose organic matter, had begun sending out complex signal patterns. "It's not just communication," Isabella explained to the assembled military leaders. "These signals are carrying biological information, instructions for restructuring living tissue at the molecular level." She pulled up a simulation showing how the signals affected Earth-based life forms. "They're not just trying to talk to us. They're trying to change us." The first attack came without warning. A small fishing village in Norway vanished overnight, replaced by a writhing mass of biomechanical growth that spread like a cancer across the landscape. Similar incidents were reported in remote locations across the globe, places where the harvesters could experiment without immediate detection. Captain Wilson led the first military response, commanding a fleet of Earth's most advanced ships against a harvester seed pod that threatened to transform a major population center. The battle revealed the terrible truth about their enemy: conventional weapons were nearly useless against something that could instantly adapt and evolve. "They're learning from every attack," Wilson reported grimly, watching footage of his ship's most powerful weapons being absorbed and repurposed by the biomechanical entities. "We're not just fighting an enemy, we're feeding it information about our capabilities." In her makeshift lab, Isabella worked tirelessly to understand the harvester's biological components. Each sample they managed to recover showed signs of both Earth-based and completely alien DNA, suggesting the entities had been absorbing and incorporating genetic material across countless worlds. "They're not just invaders," she realized one night, staring at her latest analysis. "They're evolutionary architects. Everything they transform becomes part of their network, their vision of perfect fusion between organic and artificial life." The breakthrough came when Isabella discovered something extraordinary in the genetic codes, a pattern suggesting the harvesters themselves were created by another species. But before she could investigate further, the facility's alarms blared to life. On her screens, she watched in horror as massive harvester ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their surfaces writhing with tentacles of metal and flesh. The first phase of their plan was complete. Earth's defenses had been tested, its biological samples collected and analyzed. Now the true transformation would begin. In the chaos of evacuation, Isabella clutched her precious data drives while Captain Wilson's voice echoed through the facility: "All personnel to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. The harvesters have begun planetary-wide seeding operations. May God help us all. As she rushed through the corridors, Isabella caught a glimpse through a reinforced window of the world outside. The sky had turned an unnatural shade of purple, and the ground itself seemed to pulse with new life, a horrible fusion of Earth's biosphere with the harvester's biomechanical vision. The war for humanity's future had begun, and their enemy was unlike anything they could have imagined. This was no longer about resistance or victory in any conventional sense. It was about survival, adaptation, and the very definition of what it meant to be human in a world being rapidly reshaped by beings that saw no distinction between flesh and machine. The transformation of Earth happened faster than anyone could have predicted. Kira Patel crouched behind a twisted mass of what used to be an oak tree, her camera drone hovering silently beside her. After 3 months as a resistance documentarian, she'd learned to stay hidden while recording the horror of humanity's changing world. Through her lens, she watched the biomechanical growth crawl across the ruins of downtown Singapore. The city's famous skyline had become unrecognizable, its steel and glass structures now wrapped in pulsing tissues and neural networks that glowed with an inner light. Most disturbing were the collection centers, massive organic structures where captured humans were taken for processing. "Base, are you getting this feed?" she whispered into her encrypted communicator. The response came in broken fragments through the harvester's signal interference. "Confirmed, maintain distance. Marcus needs samples. Marcus Reynolds." The name brought a mix of hope and skepticism. The former biotech engineer had become the Resistance's leading expert on harvester technology, though some questioned his growing obsession with understanding their methods. Kira's thoughts were interrupted by movement below. A patrol of altered humans, their bodies now more machine than flesh, marched in perfect synchronization through the streets. These synthetics, as the Resistance called them, were perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the invasion. Former friends and family, now servants of the harvester's hive mind. The drone sensors picked up an unusual energy signature from one of the buildings. Kira recognized it as the old biotech research facility where Marcus had once worked. If there was anything left of his research, it could prove invaluable. "I'm going in," she reported, knowing the response would be negative. She didn't wait for it. The facility's interior was a nightmare of organic technology. Walls pulsed with visible circuitry, and the air itself seemed alive with microscopic machines. Kira's protective suit, designed by Marcus using salvaged harvester tech, kept her hidden from most basic detection systems. In what used to be the main laboratory, she found what she was looking for. Marcus's old workstation had been partially absorbed by the building's new biology, but his secure storage unit remained intact. As she downloaded its contents, a familiar voice made her freeze. "Fascinating, isn't it? How they've improved upon my original designs." Marcus Reynolds stepped from the shadows, but this wasn't the Marcus she knew. His right arm had been replaced with harvester tech, and silvery lines traced across his face like circuit paths. "What have you done?" Kira whispered, reaching for her pulse pistol. "I've evolved," he said, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance. "The harvesters aren't our enemies, Kira. They're our future. Look at what they've achieved, perfect integration of biological and technological systems. No more disease, no more death, no more individual limitations. They've destroyed everything we are," Kira countered, backing away. "Turned us into slaves. Not slaves. Parts of a greater whole. But some of us can retain our consciousness while joining their network. I've proven it." He extended his transformed arm. "Join me. Help me show others the truth." Kira's response was to fire her pulse pistol, not at Marcus, but at the ceiling. The biomechanical tissue reacted violently to the energy discharge, convulsing and releasing clouds of spores. In the chaos, she ran. Her escape took her through corridors that were rapidly sealing themselves, the building's organic systems responding to the threat. Behind her, she could hear Marcus calling, his voice now mixed with inhuman harmonics. She reached the street just as her suit's filters began to fail. The drone followed, its memory cores containing both the facility's data and evidence of Marcus's betrayal. Above, the purple-tinged sky roiled with massive harvester ships, their surfaces constantly shifting like living metal. Back at the Resistance base, hidden deep in an abandoned mine system, the implications of Marcus's transformation sent shockwaves through the leadership. Dr. Isabella Martinez, who had joined their cell after the fall of the military command, studied the footage with growing concern. "He's achieved what we thought impossible," she said, examining the scans of Marcus's altered physiology. "Conscious integration with their network. But the price?" She pointed to subtle changes in his brain structure. "He's not just connected to them. He's becoming them." Captain Wilson, his face now scarred from countless battles, studied the tactical implications. "If they can turn our own scientists against us, nowhere is safe. We need to accelerate the Prometheus Protocol." The protocol was their last hope, a desperate plan to use the Harvester's own biological technology against them. But its development required understanding exactly how their transformation process worked. "We need more data," Isabella insisted. "Direct access to their primary neural network." "That's suicide," Kira interjected. "You've seen what happens to anyone who gets close to their control centers." Wilson's expression was grim. "We're running out of options. The harvesters are expanding faster than we can track. Major population centers are almost completely converted. If we don't find a way to stop them soon." He didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew what was at stake. Humanity's window for survival was closing, and their enemy's greatest weapon wasn't their superior technology or their ability to transform matter. It was their patience, their absolute certainty that, given time, all life would be improved according to their vision. As night fell over their hidden base, Kira reviewed her footage, looking for any clue they might have missed. In one frame, she noticed something odd, a pattern in the Harvester's neural network that matched human brainwave patterns. Not just any patterns, but those associated with human consciousness. "Isabella," she called, her voice urgent. "I think I found something. The Harvesters aren't just transforming us physically. They're using our own consciousness as a template for their network. We're not just their targets. We're their inspiration," Isabella finished, her eyes widening with understanding. "And that might be their one weakness." Commander Rachel Santos stood at the entrance of the abandoned subway tunnel, watching as another group of refugees filed into their underground sanctuary. Each survivor brought the same haunted look, the expression of someone who had seen their world literally transform around them. But some brought something else, hope. Another one, her security chief reported, gesturing to a teenage girl whose eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "That makes 7 this week." The gifted ones, as they'd come to call them, shared a unique trait: their minds could somehow disrupt the Harvester's control systems. Isabella's theory about human consciousness being fundamental to the invaders' network was proving true in unexpected ways. "Get her to the testing chamber," Rachel ordered. "Carefully. The last one nearly overloaded our power grid." The underground facility had once been a government contingency site, designed to survive nuclear war. Now it housed humanity's last organized resistance against a threat far stranger than atomic weapons. The main chamber had been converted into a combination laboratory and training center, where Isabella worked to understand the gifted one's abilities. "Their brainwave patterns are extraordinary," Isabella explained during that evening's briefing. "It's as if their minds naturally produce the same quantum frequencies the Harvesters use for communication. But instead of being absorbed into the network, they create feedback loops that disrupt it." Rachel studied the data on her tablet. "Can we replicate it? Give these abilities to our soldiers?" "It's not that simple. The trait appears to be genetic, possibly triggered by exposure to the Harvester's transformation fields. Attempting to artificially reproduce it could be catastrophic." The discussion was interrupted by alarms. Above ground, their sensors had detected movement, a massive harvester bioform approaching their perimeter. But this one was different. It walked on two legs and spoke with a human voice. "I know you're down there, Rachel." Marcus Reynolds' voice, distorted but recognizable, echoed through their communications system. "The changes I've undergone, they're beautiful. Let me show you." Rachel signaled her troops to battle positions while evacuating the gifted ones deeper into the facility. "How did he find us?" "He's tracking the quantum disruptions," Isabella realized. "The gifted ones' abilities are like beacons to them now." The attack came from all directions. The tunnel walls themselves seemed to come alive, sprouting biomechanical tendrils that sought to breach their defenses. Marcus had brought an entire network node with him, transforming the surrounding bedrock into an extension of the harvester consciousness. But this time, they were ready. The gifted ones, led by the teenage girl they'd just rescued, formed a circle in the central chamber. As Isabella had discovered, their combined abilities created a field that not only disrupted harvester control but temporarily reversed their biological transformations. The effect was dramatic. The invading tendrils withered and retreated. Through their security feeds, they watched Marcus stumble, his hybridized form momentarily reverting to something more human. For a brief moment, his eyes cleared. What have they done to me?" he whispered, before the harvester modifications reasserted themselves. He retreated, taking his forces with him, but the implications of what they'd witnessed were staggering. "It's not just disruption," Isabella said, reviewing the sensor data. "Their abilities can actually revert the harvester's transformations. Force their modified biology back to its original state." Rachel saw the strategic implications immediately. "We can use this. Not just for defense, but to actually reclaim what we've lost. But we'll need more power, more gifted ones. And we'll need to get closer to their main transformation centers," Isabella added. "The effect has limited range. To make a real difference, we'd need to amplify it somehow." In the days that followed, they developed a bold plan. The gifted ones would be trained to control and focus their abilities, while Isabella worked to develop technology that could amplify their quantum disruption field. But they all knew it was a race against time. The harvesters were learning, adapting. Each encounter with the gifted ones provided them with new data they could use to modify their network. And Marcus was still out there, his human intelligence now serving the invaders' hive mind. Rachel stood in the training chamber, watching the gifted ones practice. The teenage girl, whose name was Zara, had shown particular skill in controlling her abilities. As she focused, the air around her seemed to ripple with invisible energy. "We're not ready," Isabella said, joining her. "The amplification technology is unstable. If we try to boost their powers too much." "We don't have a choice," Rachel interrupted. "Look at this." She showed Isabella recent reconnaissance footage. The harvesters had begun constructing massive new structures, transformation engines that could process entire continents at once. "They're preparing for their final push. If we don't strike now, there won't be anything left to save." As if to emphasize her point, the facility's long-range sensors detected a new development. The harvester ships were moving, forming a massive grid pattern in the sky. Whatever they were planning, it was clear the endgame was approaching. Zara approached them, her eyes glowing with that strange inner light. "We understand what we have to do," she said, speaking for all the gifted ones. "Whether we're ready or not, this is our moment. Humanity's moment." Rachel nodded, feeling the weight of command, of responsibility, of hope. "Prepare the strike teams. We move at dawn." They all knew that what they were attempting might kill them. The combination of untested technology and barely understood abilities was dangerous enough. Adding combat against an enemy that could rewrite the laws of biology made it seem impossible. But as Rachel had learned in the months since the invasion began, impossible had become just another word for survival. The plan was audacious, perhaps even suicidal. Dr. Isabella Martinez worked through the night, making final adjustments to the quantum resonance amplifiers while Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their resident physicist, calibrated the power systems. The two scientists had once been academic rivals, but the harvester invasion had a way of erasing old grudges. The modulation has to be perfect, Yuki said, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. Too strong, and will fry their brains. Too weak, and the harvesters will adapt before we can establish the disruption field. The device they'd created looked deceptively simple, a network of crystalline structures that could amplify and focus the gifted one's natural abilities. But its potential effects could change the course of the war. Above ground, the world had become almost unrecognizable. The harvesters' transformation engines had turned most major cities into vast biomechanical hives, connected by pulsing networks of living metal. The purple sky was now permanent, a result of atmospheric changes caused by their technology. Commander Santos arrived at the lab, accompanied by Zara and the other gifted ones. "Time check," she demanded. "The window opens in 6 hours," Isabella replied. "When the harvester's planetary grid aligns, there'll be a moment of peak connectivity. That's when we strike." The target was the nearest neural hub, one of 7 massive structures that coordinated the harvester's global network. Getting inside would be nearly impossible. Surviving inside would be even harder. "We've detected unusual activity near the hub," Kira reported, her drone footage showing massive movements of synthetic forces. "They're gathering for something big." "Marcus," Rachel said grimly. "He knows we're coming." The transformed scientist had become their most dangerous enemy, combining human intelligence with harvester capabilities. But he'd also unwittingly provided them with crucial information. Through studying his partial transformations during previous encounters, they'd learned how the harvester's neural network could be temporarily disrupted. The assault team moved out under cover of artificial storm clouds, another gift from the harvester's atmospheric modifications. Rachel led from the front, with Zara and 3 other gifted ones close behind. Isabella and Yuki followed with the amplification device, protected by their remaining soldiers. The neural hub rose before them like a mountain of living metal, its surface constantly shifting and reforming. Massive tendrils of biomechanical tissue reached into the sky, connecting it to the harvester ships above. "Remember," Isabella broadcast to all teams, "we only need to hold the disruption field for 7 minutes. That's how long it takes for their network to complete a full synchronization cycle. Interrupt it during the peak, and the feedback could cascade through their entire system." They encountered the first resistance at the outer perimeter. Synthetics moved with mechanical precision, their transformed bodies housing weapons that were as much grown as built. But they weren't prepared for what the gifted ones could do. Zara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with inner light. The air around her shimmered as she released a wave of quantum disruption. The nearest synthetics stumbled, their biomechanical components temporarily reverting to their original states. The sight of their partially restored human faces was haunting. "Move!" Rachel ordered, leading the charge through the gap in their defenses. They fought their way deeper into the hub, through corridors that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien life. The amplification device hummed with increasing power as they approached the central chamber. Then Marcus appeared, but he was no longer even remotely human. His body had become a twisted fusion of flesh and machinery, a living weapon shaped by harvester evolution. "You still don't understand," his voice echoed through multiple mouths. "This is ascension. The next step in human evolution. Fighting it is fighting the inevitable." "There's nothing inevitable about surrender," Rachel replied, signaling the gifted ones to attack. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human experience. Waves of quantum energy collided with biomechanical forces that defied physics. The hub itself seemed to fight them, its walls trying to absorb and transform anyone who touched them. Isabella and Yuki worked frantically to keep the amplification device stable as the gifted ones pushed themselves to their limits. Zara's power had grown strongest of all, her disruption field creating visible distortions in the harvester's technology. They fought their way to the neural core, a vast chamber filled with pulsing crystalline structures that coordinated the entire network. Marcus followed, his transformed body becoming more alien with each passing moment. "The alignment is starting," Isabella announced, watching the energy readings spike. "We need to activate the device now." But as they prepared for the final push, Marcus revealed his true purpose. His body began to change again, growing and spreading until he became part of the hub itself. He wasn't just defending it, he was transforming into a new kind of control node, one that could adapt to and counter their disruption field. The whole thing was a trap, Rachel realized. He led us here so they could study our weapons up close. The gifted ones were weakening, their powers barely holding back the tide of biomechanical transformation threatening to overwhelm them. The amplification device sparked dangerously as Yuki pushed it beyond its designed limits. Then Zara stepped forward, her voice carrying a strange resonance. "No," she said. "The trap is for them." She placed her hands on the amplification device, and everything changed. When Zara connected with the amplification device, reality itself seemed to bend. Her consciousness, amplified by the quantum resonance technology, expanded through the harvester's neural network like a wave of pure human will. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the truth that had eluded them all. The harvesters weren't just invaders, they were a reflection of humanity's own potential for transformation, twisted and perverted by alien logic. And within their vast network, countless human minds still existed, preserved but imprisoned in a collective consciousness that denied their individuality. "I can feel them all," she gasped, her voice echoing with the voices of millions. "Every person they've taken. They're still alive in there, still fighting." Marcus, now more hub than human, recoiled as Zara's enhanced abilities began to affect the very structure of the neural core. The crystalline matrices that controlled the transformation process began to resonate with a new frequency, one that matched the natural rhythm of human consciousness. Isabella watched in amazement as her instruments recorded the impossible. She's not just disrupting the network, she realized. She's rewriting it. Teaching it to recognize and preserve human consciousness instead of suppressing it. The effect spread outward from the hub like ripples in a pond. Everywhere the wave touched, transformed humans began to wake up. The synthetics stopped their relentless advance, their restored minds fighting against their programming. Even the massive transformation engines scattered across the planet faltered as their control systems encountered a form of consciousness they couldn't override. Rachel organized the resistance fighters to defend Zara as she worked. The harvesters' automated defenses fought back desperately, recognizing an existential threat to their entire system. The battle for the hub became a race against time. Could they hold out long enough for Zara's changes to become permanent? Marcus, fighting against his own returning humanity, made a final desperate attempt to stop them. His transformed body began to merge with the hub's core systems, trying to isolate and contain the spread of Zara's influence. "You'll destroy everything," he warned, his voice distorting. "The network is the only thing keeping millions alive. Disconnect it now, and their transformed bodies will fail. Everyone we've taken will die." "He's right," Isabella confirmed, checking her readings. "The transformations are too complete. We can restore their minds, but we can't completely reverse the physical changes without killing them." Zara, deep in her connection with the network, saw another way. "Then we don't reverse it," she said. "We redirect it. Make the technology serve humanity instead of trying to remake us in its image." Through her enhanced consciousness, she began to reshape the harvester protocols. Instead of forcing transformation, the network could be used to stabilize and support the hybrid forms many humans had already become. Those who wished to remain purely human could be protected, while others might choose to explore controlled transformation under their own free will. The process was excruciating. Every change she made to the network sent feedback surging through her body. The other gifted ones joined their power with hers, forming a circle of protection as she completed the transformation. Even Marcus, his humanity partially restored, found himself unable to resist the rightness of what was happening. As dawn broke over a changed earth, the purple sky began to clear. The harvester ships, their controlling intelligence transformed by Zara's alterations, settled into orbit as tools rather than weapons. The great transformation engines fell silent, waiting to be repurposed. In the aftermath, humanity faced a new challenge, learning to live in a world where the line between organic and mechanical, individual and collective, had been forever blurred. The resistance bunker became the first of many integration centers, where those who had been transformed could learn to control their new abilities. Isabella and Yuki continued their work, studying the modified harvester technology to ensure it remained under human control. Rachel and her soldiers became peacekeepers, helping maintain balance between traditional humans and those who had been changed. Marcus, partially restored but forever altered, chose to work with them. His unique perspective proved valuable in understanding the technology that had both enslaved and enhanced humanity. "We were right about transformation," he told Isabella one day. "We were just wrong about letting something else control it." Zara established a school for others who showed signs of quantum sensitivity, teaching them to use their abilities responsibly. The gift that had saved humanity from extinction became a bridge between old and new forms of human consciousness. Years later, standing on a hill overlooking a city that blended organic architecture with living metal, Rachel asked Zara if she ever regretted the choice they'd made, to transform the harvester technology rather than destroy it. "We couldn't go backwards," Zara replied, watching flying vehicles that were as much grown as built cruise between buildings that pulsed with hybrid life. "The only way forward was to make the transformation our own. To prove that humanity's greatest strength isn't in resisting change, but in choosing how we change." The purple sky had given way to natural blue, but at night, the shimmer of the transformed harvester ships in orbit reminded them of how close they'd come to extinction, and how they'd turned an invasion into an evolution. Not by surrendering their humanity, but by proving it was more adaptable, more resilient, and more powerful than any force that sought to reshape it. Human consciousness, in all its beautiful complexity, had proven to be the key not just to survival, but to transcendence. The flesh forges still existed, but now they served humanity's choices rather than an alien agenda. The future would hold new challenges, but they would face them as they always had, together, yet individual. Changed, yet fundamentally human.